Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today. In this session, we will be exploring how we can use Digimap for schools to bring literature to life by mapping our literary journeys and creating interactive stories, interactive maps, and enhancing creative writing skills. So let's start. We will cover using Digimap for schools for literary exploration, creating interactive story maps with annotations and illustrations, and writing descriptive passages and essays based on map journeys. So, location, location, location. Stories often take us to wonderful and mysterious places, whether it is a magical forest, a bustling city, or a windswept coastline, setting places as a crucial role in literature. Think of the Gruffalo by Julia Donaldson, for example, when she says, "A mouse took a stroll through the deep, dark wood." The setting immediately sets the tone for the story. When a small child hears the deep, dark wood, all the sensations related to that location, to that experience of what they understand as a deep, dark wood, as a place, will set the climate for the story. From this very first sentence, the young listener will be already thinking about what is it going to bring? Is it scary? Similarly, classic fairy tales often begin with "once upon a time in a faraway land." So, and that emphasizes the importance of the place and because a faraway land is quite abstract, it's quite subjective. Each child, each person will develop their own sense of place. They will see, they will imagine that place according to their own expectations, according to their own experiences. So a place is a very important part of any story. And knowing that place, locating that place, brings the reader very close to the story that they are about to read or that they are reading, that they are going through. So, benefits of mapping literature journey. So, mapping stories has many benefits. It enhances spatial thinking and geographical skills, deepens understanding of setting and how it influences plot and character, encourages creativity in writing and visual storytelling, helps the students visualize, organize concepts, and retain knowledge. Let's look at how we can use Digimap for schools to enhance literacy skills. I have selected two stories for us today, and we are going to work a little through each one of them. One for the primary schools, A Bear Called Paddington, and one for secondary schools. We will look at Dracula. Let's take A Bear Called Paddington by Michael Bond as a first example. This story provides a fantastic opportunity to explore London through a curious bear's eyes. And then from then, a child can understand what that bear saw and how that bear felt. So there is a lot you can study with your students. You can understand and investigate through the eyes of Paddington. And let's get there. So our lesson plan, as the first stop we are going to have here when we look at Paddington Bear. And for geography, for example, you can locate key places in London, which the curriculum will refer to as a place knowledge. And in English, you can explore characters, settings, and plot with emphasis on comprehension. You can add ICT and use Digimap for schools to collect and present data. And the own manipulation, if your student is very young, the manipulation of the mouse and will already help with their motor skills. And you can even add math to this game, and you can go further and apply measurements and addition to your map if that is something that you would like to focus on with your students. So let's go to Paddington's journey and map his adventures in London, because that is our first activity here. Using Digimap for schools, students can search for locations such as Paddington Station, Windsor Gardens, and Portobello Road, add annotations and highlights, measure distance to calculate how far Paddington travels, for example. So I've created here a CSV file. And with this CSV file, we can look at points in the map where we think Paddington has been traveling, for example. So the Windsor Gardens, the fictional home of the Browns. So the real Windsor Gardens in London is in Notting Hill. And therefore I got a postcode here, the W93RG, which is approximate based on Windsor Gardens in Notting Hill. And I have here postcode for Paddington Station as well, and where the Browns find Paddington. The Barkridge, it's a department store, a fictional store, but it is inspired by the Selfridges or Harrods. And the postcode for Selfridges will be the one I'm using here. The tea room, Mr. Grabber's shop on Portobello Road, inspired by antique shops and cafes on Portobello Road. I did some digging, and it seems that there is one that would fit the specifications. It's around the corner at the postcode, which I added here. And Hampstead Health, Paddington goes for an outing there where he gets in trouble with a kite, I think. And that is that postcode there as well. So what I did is I collected those postcodes, created a CSV file, and then added to my Digimap for schools, add your own data map, so that students could identify. I have it a little more distant here, and I will explain those two maps for you. So this activity here, for example, is adaptable. And as a teacher, you better understand the abilities of your students and what you need to show them and ask from them in order to get the best of their abilities. But here you can use the search tool in Digimap for schools to find Paddington Station, Windsor Gardens, Portobello Road, Selfridge Harrods, and Hampstead Health. So if your students are already at the stage in which they can use the search and go and search for the places and create the coordinates themselves, they can do that. If not, you can create that CSV file as I showed you, and the points will already appear in your map, and you can just manipulate with them, create lines, ask your students to measure the distance, to try to follow the roads as you think Paddington would have gone, or try to find alternatives. So each student can find a different way for him to get to the points where he should get. He does take the subway from this point to this point. That's why I have here just a straight line, and you can discuss if the subway goes straight, what your students think, and things like that. So you can zoom in to view streets, buildings, and surroundings. You can look at images of these places using geograph. And you will see here, for example, I just went to geograph. That is the little camera that appears on Digimap for schools on the left side panel. And I looked for a station once I had zoomed in Paddington Station. And there are loads of images. So the little cameras, each one will show an image, and the numbers will just tell me how many images they have in that little area for the place I'm looking for. So here is one example. That's an image of the Paddington Station. You can add map annotations. You can mark locations with pins or labels. You can use the drawing tools to highlight Paddington's journey with the lines, or even with buffer zone, for example. You can add a line buffer and then explore the area he has traveled and so on. And you can measure the distance as well. So there are lots of activities you can do within the drawing tools in Digimap for schools. If you are not familiar to the drawing tools and to the annotations in Digimap for schools, I recommend you please come to one of our webinars on getting started with Digimap for schools, because there I'm going to go through all the Digimap for Schools tools and show you how to go step by step, how to create a line, how to create a polygon, how to create a buffer tool, and where you can use those things in your class as well. So moving on, we then can go ahead and once your students have understood, have a good understanding of these steps that Paddington made to get where he got, you can discuss with them if they were Paddington, where would they go in London? So here I created another CSV file and all I did is add, it's this little icon here is add your own data in Digimap for School on the left side panel. So if you have Digimap for Schools open, you will see this icon. When you click on it, it will ask you if you want to add your own file. All I did is I click on this little paper clip and looked for the CSV file I had created already with London touristic attractions, which consists on a label and the postcodes. It can be the postcode and can be the coordinates as well. The coordinates will have two columns, latitude, longitude, and then the label. The label is the titles that you want to give to the points in your map. And when you click import, this CSV file here is going to appear on your map. Again, if you want to understand how to create a CSV file, you please join our webinar on getting started with Digimap for Schools. So with those points in the map, you can adapt and create the activity that you want with your students. I added the touristic attractions, but you don't have to add the touristic attractions. You can add, for example, I think Emma once showed me she had a CSV file for the subways, for the tubes in London. So the students could pick a tube, a subway that they think that Paddington might have gone instead of Paddington, and then give another name to the bear. How would the bear be called if not Paddington Bear? If he was in a completely different subway station, for example. And then you can discuss with your students what are the places, what are the sightseeing points they could see that the bear could go and explore in that area near that station where it was. So there are lots of activities you can do with your students with the location. And once your student have understood all the details of the activities you are doing, you can go ahead and explore their creativity. So that is the time in which they are going to develop their literacy skills. So students can write a travel diary entry for Paddington's perspective, describing sights, sounds, and experiences in London. Of course, you will be better equipped to adapt this activity to the level which you expect your students to reach. So I've made a few notes here, and you can either take this as it is, or you can adapt and create your own. And you can use sensory details. You can ask your students to use emotions, the excitement, confusion, the clumsiness. How did Paddington feel when he visited those places? And you can decide the tone of the writing, the bear that is polite and curious. And they can draw their own map. They can draw their own routes. So if you go to coloring in Digimap for School, it's one of our overlays. You can get a map that is black and white, and the students can just get a map of any area, any station, and color it in, coloring in the houses, the places that you want your bear to visit, make a map, their own map. There are so many ways you can go around this. So, and if anyone has any question and would like to ask now before I move on, we are going to the secondary school now and study Dracula. But if anyone has any question, I'm happy to answer now. So let's look at Dracula by Bram Stoker. a Gothic novel full of atmospheric settings. And this is for, of course, more mature students. Again, those two books I picked, they are just suggestions. You can go and explore and look at the other books. It's just the idea is just for you to see how we can use the maps, we can use Digimap for schools to trace the steps of a character in literature, for example. And at the end, I will give you a few more suggestions of other books we can work and explore in the same theme or using similar activities. So for Dracula, let's look at the lesson plan. So for geography, for example, you can analyze landscapes and environments. For English, explore Gothic settings and their impact on mood and themes. And for history, understand historical context and explore in Digimap for schools this historic difference between the maps and the own evolution of humanity. If you look at the map and at the story as it was when it was created. So you can use Digimap for schools to locate Whitby in North Yorkshire, where Dracula first arrives. So what I did, I went to Digimap for schools and I added this postcode here, which is a postcode that will take me somewhere here in Whitby. And then I looked at my maps. I looked at the Ordnance Survey map. I looked at the historic map. This is a map from 1890s. And I have an aerial map as well. And I have the same point here, for example, Whitby Abbey and how it looked and how it looks now. So you can explore Whitby Abbey and St. Mary's Church, that they were key locations in the novel. That's where Dracula first arrives. And you can use aerial image, as I used here, to see the dramatic coastline of the cliffs and discuss why Whitby landscape suits a Gothic horror novel. So going here to the images I suggested you to take. So again, I went to Geograph, which is this little camera on the left side panel in the Digimap for schools, and look for church. So once I found Whitby, I went to Geograph, looked for church. It came with quite a few, but the first one here was St. Mary's Church, which is the one mentioned in the novel. And here are a couple more images of it. There are hundreds of images and your student can look at all of them and discuss why they think images like this would make the Gothic theme of the novel so strong and why. And I got also another image here, and this one is for the Whitby Abbey. And again, it is something you can look into with your students and analyze with them and discuss. So there are, again, hundreds of images, and you can just pick one or a few and compare them and study them and explore them with your students. So moving on. You can also explore Gothic Britain, and in my case, I searched for Piccadilly, and the postcode is here, where Dracula hides after arriving in England. And so Jonathan and Mina, if you have ever read Dracula, they spot Dracula on Hyde Park Corner along Piccadilly Street, the same street where Dracula lives at number 347. Count Dracula is known to own a residence at 347 Piccadilly in London. However, in reality, Piccadilly does not have such a high street number. And based on descriptions in the books, some researchers, including Bernard Davies, the co-founder of the Dracula Society, have identified the mansions located at 138 Piccadilly as the mansion that would have the characteristics portrayed in the novel. So this property is known as Ion House, is a grade 2 listed three-story building opposite Green Park, next to the Hard Rock Cafe, and the postcode is this one that I have here. I have added here for you. And so you can look at that place and identify all the possible Victorian streets that match the novel's eerie atmosphere, and discuss with your students why do you think Dracula was there. And that will give already a different dimension to the book, to the story, because at the moment they see something in an image and in a map, they will feel that this story is much closer to them, that this story is more relatable. And that is not just for this story, that's for any story that you are telling your students, any books that they are reading. If it is not so abstract, if it's something that is close to them, that they can connect, it will have also a bigger meaning, a bigger impact to their understanding of this story. So next, what you can do, you can go all the way to Transylvania. And so you can discuss Transylvania and its isolated landscapes to see how the setting contributes to the Gothic horror. And what I did here is I found the Carpathian Mountains. That is when Jonathan arrives at Transylvania and the trip that he does all the way to Dracula's castle in Romania. And the students can look at maps online or discuss how to depict them. I use the buffer tool here in the drawing tools to create this area, but you can go with your students and maybe even create a different area, create a different path. Where do you think that trip took place, for example? And talk about isolated landscapes and how this adds to the novel's tension. Then you can also look for the castle. I found the castle and the coordinates for the castle, which I added here, the north and east, and add an image to the map as well. So if you have an image, this image I borrowed from this page here, as long as you make a reference to where you got the image. If it is an open image, you can take and show your students, and they will have a better idea of is that castle actually exists. That is the famous Dracula's castle. It's actually called Bram Castle, and they can imagine the atmosphere. When I looked online, they had the castle in the dark, the castle in the clouds, and that can make an impact to the appearance and to the Gothic theme of the novel as well. So you can discuss why a castle like this one can be a good inspiration for a book such as Dracula, and think of castles in the UK that could be also be used. If you go here to the overlays, and look at the biomes, you can see that the forest in which this castle is situated in Romania is actually has a similar biome. It's a similar forest to the forests in the UK. So you can actually ask your students to identify a forest in the UK where they think that this story could take place, a castle in the UK where that story could be written as well. From there, they could write a descriptive piece. Students could choose a descriptive piece from the perspective of Jonathan Harder arriving in Transylvania, or Mina or Lucy in Whitby at night, or a Victoria Londoner sensing something sinister coming in the air, for example. So there are many perspectives, many ways you can go around that. And then they can share and discuss what they think. They can plot Dracula's journey on Digimap for schools and share and compare descriptions. And they can display their work in the map as a Dracula's England map with the excerpts, for example. Moving on, I just put together a few novels that you can use with Digimap for schools. Those are a few that I thought of, but there are hundreds out there, and you can bring stories to life by adding a map, playing with Digimap, adding the cross-curricular activities in geography, and making it more lively, more real so that the students can relate. So I have here suggestions like Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, Katie Morak, and The Lighthouse Keepers, Lunch, Swallows and Amazons, Where My Wellies Take Me. And those are for the primary students. For secondary schools, you can explore Treasure Island, The Hound of the Baskerville, Germinal, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, Great Expectations, Wuthering Heights, the Sherlock Holmes series, and Journey to the River Sea. And Journey to the River Sea, I was playing around with that one as well. It's quite interesting if you want to explore climate, if you want to discuss biomes, if you want to discuss sustainability and what happened to the forests and population density. So working with overlays for that one would be quite interesting, depending on what you are discussing at the moment, for example. And I have also a few suggestions here on the Emma's request to add some works by William Shakespeare, which can be used with your students to explore the novel and the story. And because I live in Scotland, I think Macbeth would be perfect, because you can actually explore Scottish geography and including Inverness and Dunsnane, and look at historical maps to compare how Scotland appears in Shakespeare's time. So I have here a couple of references as well, and those are articles I was reading while preparing this presentation and while putting this together, and they are quite interesting and a good justification on why you should use maps and you should use Digimap for schools with your literacy. That is me for today. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm really happy to answer and talk to you about that. Thank you.